Hello guys. Today I'm going to talk you through a few possible questions of the A-level psychology's biological approach, which is a part of Unit 1, and so the way I'm going to carry out this video is that I will talking a few questions, and also if there's kind of knowledge point that is missing, and I will also supplement it during the course of the video. So let's get started. Um, the first question we are going to look into today is to use the example from psychology, describe the two assumption of the biological approach. This will be a 4 marker plus 4 marker, so will give us a total of 8 marks. So the first factor we can explain is the evolutionary influences. Here's my answer. One assumption of biological approach is that the behavior are results of evolutionary influences. Darwin's theory of natural selection states that any genetically determined behavior that enhances the chance of survival will be naturally selected. These adaptive behavior are passed on to the next generation through the genetic transmission, leading to a continuation of the behavior. Evolution can therefore help explain how the human mind and behavior have changed over millions of years so that they meet the demands of our individual environments. For example, the evolutionary psychologist argues that certain phobias exist because of the past past events which are adaptive to our species. For example, Martin Seligman in 1970 has argued that the human evolved to rapidly learn an association between the life-threatening stimuli and fear. Some phobias, such as the fear of snakes and heights, may still exist because our ancestor who feared these experiences live longer as they avoid those kind of dangerous stimuli are passed these behaviors to future generations. So, for example, in a modern society, many people may just be extremely fear of snakes. So they may develop a phobia to it, but this kind of phobias may not apply to car. So as a evolutionary psychologist, I think majority of fellow honorable gentlemen and other kind of experts, I think will probably argue that kind of because millions of years ago, people do not simply assume that there's existence of car, but after the industrial revolution, the cars and these kind of industrial capital goods are beginning to emerge. So therefore, so from some kind of perspective, that the snakes are more threatening stimuli to our existence rather than in comparison to these kind of industrial products. So therefore, we may have become more fearful towards these kind of inherent fear, as Martin Seligman will quote in will said in his kind of essays, and therefore. This assumption of evolutionary influences can affect our perception of other kind of stimuli and therefore influence our response to them. So another assumption is localization of brain function. One of the assumptions of behavioral approach is that localization of the brain function. The brain is made up of two hemispheres, the right and left, which divided into 4 lobes. Behaviors are linked to each lobe of the brain. The frontal lobes are involved in thinking and creativity. This bit is quite important and have been linked to our personalities. The parietal lobes process sensory informations, means as occipital lobes process the visual information. Do apologize. The parietal lobes process sensory informations, and whereas the occipital lobes process the visual informations. as the word occipital have demonstrated. Like any stuff with or c in the in the front of the term usually means this kind of visual visual kind of stuff involved inside. And lastly, the temporal lobes are involved in memory processing and auditory processing. So it's basically to do with our ears and our memories. And when any kind of these areas become damaged, the behavior could also be changed. An example of the localization of brain function would be will be the hippocampus in temporal lobe. For example, there's the patient name, the pseudonym is HM, whose hippocampus was removed and following the surgery of epilepsy, and was left without ability to form or to generate new long-term memories or to recall the existing long-term memories. This reinforces how the brain areas affects our behavior. So actually, for this question, we only need to state two, but also for we should always aim for a higher to be fully prepared for exam, right? So therefore I also state the third assumption of the approach, which is assumption links to relationship formation. Apologize again. It is the neurotransmitters assumption. So one assumption of biological approach is that roles of neurotransmitters. The neurotransmission is a process whereby the neurotransmitters transmit the electrical message from the axon of one neuron, which is presynaptic neurons, to the dendrites of another neuron, which is called postsynaptic neuron, which electrical signals reaches the end of the neuron. It triggers the release of tiny sacs that had been inside the cells. The synaptic vesicles hold chemical messages known as neurotransmitters. These neurotransmitters across the synapse and are picked up by the neighboring cells receptors in order to carry messages between the cells. These neurotransmitters can become imbalanced and result in changes in behaviors, including the mental illnesses. An example of this will be serotonin, which is important for our mood. In low levels of serotonin have been associated with depression. This demonstrated a link between neurotransmitter levels and our behavior. So here we go. Now we are moving to another kind of questions, which is basically asking about how do biological approach assumption can be linked to the relationship formation. So to start us off, I should endeavor myself to explain to you guys the way I'm going to approach this question. So as you guys can see, I wrote for these kind of question, my mechanism or my strategies is to first state about the assumption, and then I explain it, and then I link it, and then we give an example. So one assumption of biological approach is that our behavior is a result of the evolutionary influences. This is where the traits have that more adaptive that can enhance the reproduction are being naturally selected and passed off to the offspring, so the genetic transmission. And another link will be the males and females have different selective pressures, which means that they look for different things in a romantic relationship. These traits are naturally selected as they enhance the chance of successful reproduction. These selective pressure influences how relationships are formed. So, for example, the males are looking for signs of fertility, smooth skin, glossy hair, something like that, and these are like example of physical attractiveness. This also includes loads of different factors which you can basically use them freely. And in contrast, female will seek the resources for survival for their offsprings, for example, food and shelter, which translate to earning potential and money. As female invest more time and energy in their offspring, they are more choicier, which was called parental investment theory. This helped explain the formation of the relationship between a younger female and a older male. So now we are going to approach the question of describing the key components of the therapy. In biological approach, we call them psychosurgery. So, actually, I use the mark scheme to give a little bit essay plan here, so that you guys can basically see the outline along with me. So first thing, I'm going to discuss is the psychosurgery, and then I think the first thing obviously I will discuss this example of psychosurgery, and I will also mention about prefrontal lobotomy, and then deep brain stimulation, also known as DBS, and also depend on time. If I have more time, I will obviously include others. So here we go. And one component of psychosurgery is a prefrontal lobotomy, developed by Moniz. The two holes would be drilled on either side of the skull, and the instrument called leukotomy will be inserted in order to cut the white matter in the brain and destroy the connection in the prefrontal cortex. This will be carried on the carry out by a neurosurgeon, which will take a few hours. Moniz developed this procedure to be used on patients with mental health issues, such as anxieties and depression, while he noticed that monkeys who have their frontal lobes removed the behavior were more subdued. Another component of psychosurgery was transorbital lobotomy, developed by Freeman, which did not require a neurosurgeon and took approximately 3 to 4 minutes. An instrument similar to an ice pick will be inserted under the eyelid. Once in place, the instrument will be tapped in a small hammer. Will be tapped with a small hammer in order to break through the skull and enter the frontal lobe. Here the instrument will be moved in a widescreen motion in order to sever the connection between the frontal lobe and other brain areas such as the thalamus. Today, the modern stereotactic methods of psychosurgery are used where the brain scans identify the target brain areas very precisely. One example is capsulotomy in the treatment of OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and capsulotomy would involve inserting electrodes through the top of skulls into an area near the thalamus. The electrodes would be heated in order to burn away the tiny proportion of the tissue. An alternative modern method is deep brain stimulation, also called DBS. So the electrodes are placed in the patient's brain, where they are connected to battery packs in the patient's chest. The battery packs are able to produce an adjustable high-frequency current in order to disrupt the brain circuitry. For example, in the treatment of the severe depression, area 25 in the frontal cortex will be targeted. So, now we are perfectly done with this question, and now we are going to do the evaluation of the therapy, psychosurgery, as I have put in purple over here. And now the specific question is evaluate the psychosurgery in terms of effectiveness and ethical considerations, which is a 12 marker. And feel free to pause the video if you want to take some time to plan, and before I can share my model response with you guys. But let's go on. One weakness of traditional psychosurgery is that it did not work for everyone. For example, the early lobotomies have a fertility rate of 6% by Commerce 2002. And and a range of severe side effects, including the seizures and a lack of emotional responsiveness. For example, Rosemary Kennedy, as a case for her, has underwent a transorbital lobotomy and was left severely disabled. This demonstrates that these lobotomies were ineffective, especially as many patients relapsed and had undergone the procedure multiple times. Furthermore, it suggests that the surgery was unethical, causing both psychological and physical harm to the participants. On the other hand, one strength is that the modern methods of psychosurgery have supporting evidence. For example, capsulotomy has been found that to be effective in 67% of OCD cases and 55% of depression cases. I found to remember these kind of statistic is quite a little bit challenging, but anyway, we have to get through it. And now I'll put in highlights over this sentence. And additionally, Maybeck in 2005 et al. Have found that 4 out of 6 patients with depression improved following the DBS, which stimulated the area 25 in the frontal cortex. This suggests that modern techniques are more effective as they can help the individual with severe mental illness where the drug therapy has failed. However, the surgery used as method of last resort means sample size. Apologize. Let me add this means. So let's continue. However, as surgery is used as a method of last resort, means the sample size are small, which makes the generalization difficult, especially as they are rarely used for disorders such as phobias and schizophrenia, and therefore limited in their use. More research is obviously needed, therefore, regarding where to implant these electrodes and combine with larger sample to improve the external validity. A further weakness is that the psychosurgery is that the traditional lobotomies were not used as a method of last resort. For example, Howard Dolly was a children who underwent the transorbital lobotomy for his troublesome and aggressive behavior, which her mom have sent him to see the psycho to saw the neurosurgeon, and it can be argued that due to his age, along with lack of restriction facing physicians at the time, and the patient did not fully consent to the procedure because he is too little to make a decision of his own. And this suggests that early procedure was widely unethical. Although today's individuals can be agree and refuse to undergo the modern psychosurgery, it can be argued that vulnerable individuals will still be left with a severe mental stuck in the severe mental illness, may not be in the right frame of mind to fully understand the procedure and to provide a valid consent, and also to perceive and its side effects. Thus, a lack of the valid consent may still be ethical weakness of today. In conclusion, it is clear that prefrontal and transorbital lobotomies are both ineffective and unethical. Although there's a risk of physical and psychological harm with newer methods such as possibly the seizures and altered mood with DBS, it can be argued that the potential benefits in terms of the quality of the life for such individuals outweigh these limitations. Furthermore, these methods of stereotactic surgery involving use brain scans in order to pinpoint the exact areas of brain which needed to be targeted, reinforcing how much more effective and ethical the psychosurgery is for today. So, now, another question. we Oh my gosh. So here we are. We are in another question of explaining why the psychologist from biological approach will view psychosurgery or drug therapy as an appropriate therapy. so I mean, let's get started. A biological psychologist will view the psychosurgery as inappropriate, as it is based on the localization of brain function assumption. So localization of brain function, okay, which suggests that different area of brain have different functions. If these area become damaged or impaired, this can lead to problematic behaviors. Deep brain stimulation, DBS, a modern form of psychosurgery, works by interrupting the brain circuitry, and a adjustable high frequency current can be used to influence the brain areas, such as areas 25, in the treatment of severe depression. The biological psychologist will view this as inappropriate, as the biological approach focuses on innate factor influencing our behavior. Therefore, the psychosurgery which alters the brain will be seen as appropriate, opposed to talking therapies such as counseling or cognitive behavioral therapy to treat the mental illnesses. And now we are here in the classic research. So we are required to describe the methods and procedures of the Rhine et al. Experiments on the criminal behavior. So adapted from the Marxian, the few kind of a few kind of content we should involve over here, and also have a little bit of elaboration of my own. So here is a conglomerate version of what we have over here. So first of all, Rhine et al.'s experiment is in quasi experiments, as somebody may call it, and its IV independent variables is NGRI or control. So the DV is that the differences in brain activity as an outcome. So during the process, an opportunity sample of 82 participants was recircuited, which include 41 murders, include 39 men, and 2 women have a mean age of 34.3, are pleading NGRI, referred to the University of California for examination to obtain the proof of sanity. 23 have history of brain injury, or diseases, and the brain and having schizophrenia. 41 murders the control groups have a mean age of 31.7 years old, formed by matching each murders with a normal individual of the same sex and age, which is a matched pair design. So this is a matched pair design because the 6 schizophrenics are matched with 6 schizophrenics from mental hospital. Also have no history of psychiatric illnesses themselves in a close relative. All the participants' medications. So I will use the PS abbreviation over here, just for information, and for 2 weeks previous to the scan. So the PET scan was used to study the active brain. All participants was given an injection of radioactive glucose tracer called FDG. This tracer is absorbed by more active areas of the brain. All P's are asked to do a continuous performance task, which somebody call it CPT, and which activates the target areas of brains. The participants were given a chance to practice CBT before receiving the tracer injection. So 30 seconds before the tracer injection, all the participants started the CBT so that initial task, novelty, um, wouldn't be appeared on the PET scanner. So 32 minutes after the injection, the PET scan was done for each participant. 10 horizontal slices um, of the brain was recorded. The cortical peel technique and box techniques was used to image the brain, and all the participants have an individually molded head molders to keep their head still during a PET scan. Um, so here's a note over here I would like to recommending to you guys is that we must write in full sentences in exams clearly, because this one is a oversimplified plan, including some of the key point, but in exams we should always write in the full sentence. Okay, so now I will describe. Sorry. So now we are on the question that we should describe the findings and conclusion of the classic research by Ryan et al. This one is an 8 marker. So one of the findings was that NGRI had abnormal symmetries. This is where there was reduced activity on the left side of the brain and greater activities on the right. Another finding was that the NGRI had reduced activity in area where lowered activity had previously linked to violence, like prefrontal cortex, corpus luteum, callosum, angular gyrus. That one is in left hemisphere, and amygdala in the left hemisphere. Hippocampus also in the left hemisphere, and thalamus, it is also in left hemisphere. And in addition, the NGRI had increased glucose metabolisms in the areas that have not been previously linked to violence. The cerebrums, amygdala in the right hemisphere, the hippocampus in the right hemisphere, the thalamus in the right hemisphere. So, just I know this section is a little bit overwhelming, and even me is feeling a little bit. So I'm trying to sum it up over here. So basically, abnormal symmetries and reduced activity on the left, and increased activities which previously not linked to violence. So I hope this will make sense a little bit more. So I'll just write here, reduced activities on the left, and increased activities not linked to violence. So, furthermore, there was no difference in areas not previously linked to violence but linked to mental illnesses. For example, like midbrains, chordates, and putamen, and globus pallidus, globus pallidus. And regarding the CPT, the NGRI and controls perform similarly. Therefore, the brain differences may not related to the task performance. 6 of the NGRI were left-handed. They had less amygdala asymmetry and higher medial prefrontal activity than the right-handed murders. So I would say this one is also quite important. So I will put a highlight over here. Six people with in NGRI were left-handed and less amygdala asymmetry. So, just excuse me to drink a slip of water. Let's continue. Although 14 of the murders were non-white, a comparison between them and the white murders showed no significant difference in brain activity. Lastly, 23 of the murders had a history of head injury, but they didn't differ from murders with no history of brain injury apart from the corpus callosum. In conclusion, it can be concluded that, yeah, I know it's a little bit repetitive, but um, I mean, the murders pleading the NGRI have different brain functioning to normal individuals. However, the finding cannot be taken to demonstrate that violence is purely a result of biology. The social and economic factors must also be taken into the consideration. Furthermore, the findings do not suggest that murders pleading NGRI are not responsible for their actions, nor that PET scan could be used as an diagnostic technique. Additionally, the findings do not establish a causal link between brain dysfunction and violences. It is unclear that whether brain activity cause him or become a murder cause brain dysfunction. However, it can be concluded that abnormal symmetries of the activity in amygdala, thalamus, and hippocampus may be one of the many predisposition towards violence. Ow. So now let's evaluate this classical research. The Rhine et al. Usually, this kind of evaluate question, the critically evaluates question will be appear as the 12 markers. So this means we need a conclusion over here, and ideally we can have four main body paragraphs and one conclusions. But if we in exams there's always some of us will running out of time, so I will suggest that we can do three main paragraphs and one conclusions, but also include some points. I mean it's not some points, I mean it's like 1 point in the last paragraph. So let's get started. One strength that Rhine have used a match pair design. For example, he matched the murders pleading the NGRI with controls who are the same age and gender. In addition, 6 murders of schizophrenia were matched with 6 controls with schizophrenia. This suggests the study had high internal validity, as the only difference between two groups was whether they had committed a murder or not. Reducing the participant variables made it easier to see the effects of this had on brain activity. However, although the use of quasi-experiments was ethical as the IV, the murder or not was a pre-existing feature of the participant, it can be argued that this lower the internal validity of some research as cause and effect cannot be established. Does committing a murder change the brain activity, or is that the brain activity causing an individual to commit a murder? In addition, another weakness was that the study may cause the harm to participants. For example, all participants underwent a PET scan which involved an injection with a radioactive glucose tracer, as well as being in a confined space. So for example, somebody with claustrophobia may be extremely scared in these kind of under such circumstances, and conceive themselves to be really vulnerable in this sense, because these kind of I mean this the kind of place they are putting. Also, all the participants had to be Medicaid free for 2 weeks prior to the brain scan. This suggests that the participant may have experienced both physical harm, for example, the side effects from stopping the medication, as well as psychological harm, for example, feeling the anxious when undergoing the PET scan. On the other hand, a strength is that the procedure was standardized. For example, the Rhine et al. Carefully and fully reported the procedure of the study in his report, which can be read online in full text. Also, the same instructions, also procedure was used for all 82 participants, such as the same CPT task, the PET scan. This suggests that the study had high external and internal reliability. The study could also be replicated to check the consistency over time in relation to the differences in the brain activity between murders and the non-murders. So, in conclusion, the study is a good piece of research. By identifying the brain abnormalities in the NGRI groups using scientific and objective PET scans, this can be used to inform the criminal justice system when making the decisions on sentencing, who release from prisons, and demographic factors. It can be combined with the biological factors. This positive social implication of the research can help ensure a fair society and safer society for every one of us. So to evaluate the whole approach, usually to be a 10 marker, to sum up the strengths and weaknesses, and now I will just as always, if you want to post videos and just to write some kind of essay plans yourself, you're much more welcome to do so. One weaknesses of the biological approach is that it only consider the role of the nature. For example, the assumption, well, actually, I will say, a better way to do this maybe I will discuss the kind of main ideas of me writing these kind of essays, the kind of biggest ideas I'm thinking about, rather than just directly read it everything out. So first main point I'm going to raise over here is that it only consider the role of nature, because essentially biological approach is saying that because some kind of weird cells or molecular cells in your body have some kind of dysfunction, therefore contributing to your behavior, to your kind of your own psychological problem. A huge weakness of this kind of assumption, or I should say the stance over the scientific studies, is that it will overlooks the roles of the nurture, which is the way we are being influenced by the environments. So therefore, many kind of treatment options will be limited. And the second point I have argued is for the scientific nature of the biological approach, as they use many kind of specialized equipments. And after that, I also state that the weakness, to rebuttal my former points, I suggest that a weakness of the biological approach is that it is very deterministic, because it's hugely dependent on certain kind of factors, and therefore our free wills or our ability to acting behalf ourselves, to be as Carl Jung have once suggested, all kind of behavior are not being accepted by others, but our behavior and our lives are only determined by myself. Obviously, the biological approach will reject the statement by the famous psychologists such as Carl Jung, which supports the idea of free will. So one last and after that, I do rebuttal the point again by arguing about applications. So the application, scientific, reduction, no, not reductionist, the deterministic, and nature will be my good and bad. Well, I would say use merit and dismerit will be more appropriate term in such context and of the plan of this essay. Um, one weakness of this biological approach is that it's only considered the role of nature. For example, the assumption the neurotransmitters focuses on how our brain influences our behavior, such as the depression being linked to low level of serotonin. This clearly this is clearly on the nature side of the nature-nurture debate. This is a weakness because the approach ignores the nurture, the influence of environments in our behavior. And as a result, this will be reductionist by simplifying our behavior, ignoring the nurture, may limiting the treatment options. As a biological approach will view that will only focus on biological therapies, for example, drug therapies, rather than talking therapies such as CBT. This is a problematic phenomena because the depression can be linked to negative life events which the biological approach ignores and or overlooks. On the other hand, a strength of the biological approach is that it is scientific. Essentially, for example, the key methods that include the brain scans such as PET scans carried out by Ryan et al. To compare the brain activity of the murderers and non-murderers. These scans produced objective results such as reduced activity in prefrontal cortex. This is a strength because the series and therapies from the approach can be tested to identify the cause and effect relationship. This increased the internal validity as extraneous variables. For example, something like temperatures, and these stuff are carefully. They are eliminating from from not eliminating, but they cannot be any effects on the ultimate results of the experiments. Such scientific studies can also be repeated to check the reliability of the findings. However, one weakness of the biological approach is that it is hugely deterministic. For example, the localization of brain function assumption states that different parts of the brain are responsible for different behaviors, such as the reduced volumes of amygdala, making someone more likely to commit a violent crime. This is a weakness because that approach ignores the free will. If the behavior, if behavior is biologically determined, then this have a clear implication for criminal justice system, which could if a person with amygdala dysfunction who has committed a crime to be punished and given a therapy, free will need to be acknowledged so that individual can take the responsibility for the behavior. And finally, in conclusion, although there is weakness of the research, perhaps the most important strength of the biological approach that it has positive social implications. For example, the biological therapies have been shown highly effective in treating of mental illnesses. Maybert et al. In 2005 found that the DBS to be effective in treating severe depression for 4 out of 6 the patients where the other therapies have failed. This is in strength because it shows that external validity of the approach. As a result, the strengths clearly outweighed any kind of weaknesses. The behavioralist approach questions, but I intend to put this behavioralist approach questions in kind of my response to another videos. Overall, I hope you found this video helpful, and thank you for spending time or devoting your time to revise with me, and all the best to your exams and your future studies, and